Hi there, welcome everyone. Welcome to our LEAP webinar. Today we're going to be talking about going back to school as a new parent without going broke. So if you don't know me yet, my name is Caitlyn. I'm one of the co-founders of LEAP. I've been an accredited financial counselor, and I've been financial counseling for about 17 years now. I've worked with hundreds of new and expectant parents. And I've worked with a lot of people, particularly on this topic of going back to school without going broke. This is actually a really big deal because when we have little ones at home or we're expecting, often we feel like we need to increase our income. And the number one way we're told that you can increase your income is to go back and get more education, right? So that's not a bad decision. There's a lot of good things that comes with that. But we need to weigh all the pros and cons of what it means to go back to school and to possibly take on a new expense or take on a loan and have to pay that back, especially again when we have little ones at home. So we want to make sure we're doing this smart. We want to make sure we're doing this well. And we want to make sure that this, whatever it be, an additional certification, a degree, whatever it is actually a blessing. And it's not going to be a hindrance to our financial growth, especially again, having little ones. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about how we can go back to school without going broke. Okay, so I get this question a lot. They know it feels overwhelming, but they don't know exactly why they're feeling so overwhelmed by this decision. Well, it's a legitimate reason as to why you're feeling overwhelmed. There's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of different things that you're juggling. So it's okay if this decision does feel overwhelming. That's actually really natural and that's good. If this doesn't feel overwhelming to you as a financial counselor, to me, that gets me nervous because I don't know if you're fully accepting all of the different pros and cons of what it means to go back to school. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, again, as a financial counselor, I say, this person's taking this decision seriously, right? So if you don't feel overwhelmed, probably time to take a step back and look at all the different aspects of what it means to go back to school. But if you are feeling this way, it is okay. It's all right. It does feel overwhelming for several different reasons. So first of all, when you already have a little one at home where you're expecting, you know your time is limited, right? So you're dealing with not just your own time right now, you're dealing with juggling your time as a parent, right? And all those different elements that come with that. Also, budgets get tighter when we have little ones at home. There's more people and the resources to go around have to get spread among more people, right? So that tight budget feeling or the tight budgets are why we may feel overwhelmed. Finally, this is a big one, and I see this a lot with people when they're going back to school, is the rules around financial aid are so confusing. It is bonkers. You don't know what is what, which way is up, and you have people explaining things to you really fast and having you make decisions quickly, and it feels really overwhelming because you want to make sure you're making the best decision for you. And you're thinking, hold on, is it just me not understanding this? Or is there something they're kind of like hiding? They're not explaining to me. So that whole process can feel very confusing. So for these reasons, that's why it does feel overwhelming, often for new parents in particular, because we have all these other elements going on. So like I said, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay. It tells me that you're making this decision, taking into account all the different variables that you are having to decide upon. So it's okay if it feels overwhelming. Let's go through all the elements and see if we can, hopefully demystify some things and help you understand all the different elements side by side so you can make the best decision for you. Okay. All right. So even though it is overwhelming, affordable education is possible. It is completely possible. The reason is those free and low cost programs do exist. They are out there. There's a lot of programs, particularly for new and expectant parents, that are out there for the sake of getting you back to school and getting you more education so you can provide for you and your family, right? A lot of these programs coincide with if you're eligible for WIC or SNAP or one of those things, right? On one of those benefits you may already be on. There's often free training, job training, education that goes along with those programs, again, in an effort to increase your income. So those free and low cost programs do exist and they are out there. The second thing is grants and scholarships can cover most, if not all, of the cost. Again, because you are a new parent, you are in a special category and you're able to check that off on the scholarship and grant application. So there are things out there for this target population, again, for the purpose of getting you increasing your income and being financially stable for you and your child. So those things can cover most, if not all, of the cost. Finally, there are local support to fill the gaps. There's a lot of churches, there's a lot of local groups, all different supportive organizations that are locally based, that aren't just federal or belong to the university system. But these programs are out there, again, with the intention of getting you additional training and getting you to increase that income by sending you back to school. So those things are there to fill the gaps. So if you are considering going back to school, affordable education is completely possible. I have seen it time and time again. So definitely look into those things, and they are out there to get you on the path to being successful. Okay, so this is something I do want to address because I've seen this way too many times as a financial counselor. The first thing I want you to do before we even start looking at the grants and scholarships and all those different things is I want you to pick the right school. This is so important. I have seen this situation time and time again. I worked with many clients who went to a school that was, hard sale. They were pushing it. They were, overselling what the return on the investment was going to be. These schools are often for profit, which there's nothing wrong with that in itself, but they do have different motivations that they're going to be a little bit more of a hard sale, right? They're going to want to make sure they get you enrolled right away. So I've seen people go to these different schools, get enrolled in a program that is very expensive, where the return on the investment is not where it needs to be. And these people will go to the financial aid office at these schools, and they call themselves financial aid offices. But really what they do is they get you wrapped up in an expensive student loan that you can't afford. So please, please, please pick the right school. You want to make sure you're picking a school and ask these questions before you enroll. You want, like I said, you want to make sure you're picking a school that is appropriate for you and it's not going to get you over indebted. And they really do have your best interests at heart. So these are the questions I want to make sure you ask before you agree and sign any enrollment application. So is it accredited? This is a big one. Is this school accredited? Does it have the appropriate accreditations to get you into the field that you want to get into? You want to know what is the total cost, not just the tuition, because a lot of schools, especially the for-profit schools, will wrap in additional fees and different things into the total cost of attendance, and they tell you the tuition is one thing, and then you go to pay your tuition and they say, oh, there's all these extra fees that you have to pay and you were not aware of. So make sure you know the total cost of the education, not just the tuition. You also want to know what the graduation rate is. A lot of schools are really good at getting people enrolled and they look really busy. And then these people have a really hard time getting to graduation because they weren't told the total cost of admission, or they weren't told, what the requirements are of their students. So what is the graduation rate? You want to see something that has a higher graduation rate, because that tells you that once they get that student enrolled, they're going to make sure they successfully get through that accredited program, right? All right. The next thing you want to ask is, will this credential help me get a job? This is a big question. We want to make sure that the economy is one that's going to sustain that particular credential. So we often see that credentials in the healthcare industry are very lucrative. Those are ones that tend to have a good ROI, not all the time, but they tend to. Things like in that kind of realm, right? So we want to make sure that we're looking for credentials that actually will get you a job, and we're not just accumulating like an alphabet soup of credentials after our name and we don't have employment, right? And then the final question I want to make sure you ask is, what's the loan repayment rate of past students? What this tells us is the previous students who've gone through their program, were they able to successfully get gainful employment where they're able to pay off the loan amount and then go on to be successful themselves without having this loan burdening them down? I see a lot of schools out there, again, particularly the for-profit schools, where their repayment rate is very low. And what that tells us is that their students are not able to be gainfully employed, and they can't pay off their loans, putting them in collections and putting them in a worse spot than they were even originally. So ask these questions before you enroll in any school. If you feel like they're being, there's hard sale tactics, if they're being pushy, if they're encouraging you to sign things before you're ready, hit pause, step away, take a moment, and do the research on your own. Because if you're getting that sense when you're prior to enrollment, that's your intuition telling you something. So step away. There's a lot of other schools out there that you can look into. We're not limited anymore by our geography. We can go and do virtual schools, all those different things. So take a step away, assess whether this is the right program for you before you sign on the dotted line. Okay. So once you decide on a school and you decide where you want to go and you realize, this is a school that I'm going to be probably successful in because they have a historic rate of success with their previous students. At that point, you want to understand their financial aid process. Now, their Office of Financial Aid deals with 3 key elements of paying for tuition. So the first one being grants. Those are need-based most often, and you don't have to repay those. Those are just free money, right, to get you through school. The next one is scholarships. Those are often merit-based or situational. So this is within the scholarship realm. This is where you're going to make sure that you that they note that you're a parent and that you have a young child, because that will often get you additional scholarships. And then loans is a third element of financial aid, and those must be repaid. So often what I see clients after they've gone to the financial aid office and they go in there and they're told that their full cost of their tuition and their, expenses are covered. And they get their financial aid letter and they figure, oh, I'm good to go. I got scholarships and grants. Not so fast. You may have a large portion of your tuition being covered by loans, or they assume you're going to be covering them by loans. And those are things that you have to pay back. So we want to make sure we're maximizing our grants, we're maximizing our scholarships, and we're minimizing our loans. Loans are not bad in themselves, but if someone's going to give you free money to go to school, use that free money before we go ahead and just go for loans, right? They often make the loan process much easier than the grant and scholarship process because it's easier, right? Like once you sign on the dotted line, you're on the hook. And student loans are not like regular debt. Student loans do not go away in a vast number of situations. They don't go away with bankruptcy, and they can garnish your wages, right? So if you don't repay. So student loans are serious. These things don't go away. So we want to make sure we're minimizing those as much as possible and maximizing our grant applications and our scholarship applications to hopefully minimize the amount that we take out in loans. So those are the 3 key elements of financial aid. Often I see people go into the financial aid office assuming they're just getting scholarships and grants. That's not true. The loans is a huge part of what they do, so you want to make sure you're minimizing that part, okay? All right. Now, when you are in school, right, and you are going through the process, it's also really important that we watch our family budget, okay? We want to make sure we're budgeting smart and we're not going out of whack with any of these elements of our family spending plan. If you're not familiar, LEAP has a program called Budget Like a Mother, and we can walk you through the process of building a spending plan where you can be successful with you and your child. It's completely possible, but you want to make sure you're watching all the elements of your spending, that we're not letting something go, too crazy, that we're not overpaying for housing costs, or we're not, skimping out on food, those kind of things. We want to make sure we have an aligned budget that fits our values, fits our family situation, and that we're not overpaying for one thing, underpaying for another, all that kind of fun stuff. So this one I'm not going to get too far into because we have the Budget Like a Mother program with LEAP. So if you want to go ahead and enroll with our Budget Like a Mother program, it's available for free on the LEAP app, and we'll walk you through the whole process of budgeting smart and budgeting like a mother. Okay. So I covered this a little bit earlier, but I just want to make sure we cover this again, that we're not ignoring this. We really want to make sure, especially as new and expectant parents, that we are avoiding those predatory schools. As a financial counselor, having done this for many years and worked with many, many new parents, I have seen predatory schools get people in a world of trouble. The reason is a lot of these schools will, they open up very quickly. They have hard sales tactics, like I said before, and then they over rely on student loans. So the schools go ahead and they get the amount that they're owed, right? Because they get paid the tuition via your student loan. And then you're on the hook forever paying off the student loan. And the degree program, the certification program may not be that great, right? So there's a lot of schools, it was probably about 10 or 15 years ago that actually just were closed out of the blue. So students who were like 3/4 of the way or almost done with the program, those students had no degree. They had all the loans. They had, no benefit of having gone through all the hassle of going to school. So you really want to make sure you're not getting enrolled in a predatory school and a school that's going to try and take advantage of you. So again, I'm not attacking those for-profit schools, but those are the ones we want to look out for the most because those are the ones that tend to fall into this category. But just some red flags to look out for. We want to make sure they're not pressuring us to enroll quickly. There is no pressure to enroll quickly. There's too many schools that have rolling enrollment where you don't need to be enrolled by a certain date in order to catch the next semester, right? Schools don't work like that so much anymore. Some do, but not all of them. So if they're pressuring you to enroll quickly, red flag. Take a deep breath, step aside, and take some time to think about it. If they have no clear job placement stats, I've seen this a lot where they just kind of make up a lot of, our students, place in the, top, percentile of whatever they say. Like, it's just crazy, right? So we want to make sure that when they present you with these job placement statistics, that they are presenting hard numbers that they can show you where they got these hard numbers, right? And they should be, as a school, tracking these numbers because that's their bread and butter. This is what they do. If they don't have the numbers to show you their job placement statistics, walk away. Okay, also if there's hidden fees. So before we talked about, you want to make sure you understand the total cost of enrollment, not just the tuition. A lot of for-profit schools will advertise their tuition being very low. And then you go to enroll and they have very heavy fees that aren't necessarily tuition, but it still affects your cost of enrollment. So make sure you're looking out for those. If there's a lot of hidden fees or fees at the very end they didn't tell you about, I would step away and I would take a time to reassess whether this is the right school for me. If they're over promising job outcomes, if they're telling you that, they have 100% job placement rate and every one of their students makes 6 figures on graduation day. That's crazy. That's usually not the case. So if they're over promising and overselling, that tells you that this might be a predatory school. And if they have high default rates, if they have a lot of students enrolling but not graduating, that tells us that this school might be predatory, that all they care about is enrolling the students and getting the tuition payment, but they're not actually walking them through the process of graduating. So those are things you want to look out for. But don't let the slick, sales tactics get you wrapped up into student loan debt that you don't have a degree to back up, right? Okay, so there are local support programs out there and they can make this completely possible. So once you find that right school for you, you find the tuition rate that you are happy with. If you you go ahead and you get those grants and loans, and you minimize, or sorry, grants and scholarships, grants and scholarships, you minimize the loans that you're going to get. At that point, you may still have a little bit of a gap, right? Maybe your childcare is going to be making your expenses exceed your income or whatever it is, right? So at that point, I want you to look into local support programs. There are subsidized programs, particularly for childcare, particularly for students out there. So just go ahead and Google subsidized childcare in my area or type in your zip code and see what's possible. Also, ask your school. They should have an office that deals with things like childcare where they can point you in the right direction, right? So this is a very common issue a lot of new parents face. Ask the question, see what they say, and look into local support programs. Also housing, there's a lot of student programs for housing. There's family housing often on campuses, things like that. So there should be some kind of housing assistance that you can apply for. Being a student may mean that you're reducing your income temporarily because your time is now going to be spent at school. So you may now qualify for things like WIC or SNAP or access to food pantries. And ask at your school for discounted passes for whether it be the bus or for parking passes, things like that on campus, to hopefully reduce those kind of expenses. And those kind of things, just asking for those simple things can be the difference between affording school and not being able to afford school. So ask the questions, see what they say, and see what resources they offer. Okay, so bottom line is that you can do this. There are ways to pay for school as a new parent and to make sure you can afford it. Um, there are so many programs out there that are going to make sure that they're going to walk you through the process of applying. They're going to walk you through the process of, going through the financial aid process and then getting through school. It's not a matter of having to go full-time or part-time. There's a lot of things in between now because there's so many options for new parents. So you may be able to work in addition to go to school and parent your baby. So lots of different options out there now. And yeah, we just want to make sure that you understand what they are. We're not getting over indebted and we're not letting ourselves get wrapped up into a predatory school situation that's going to be, cumbersome for the next how many years as you're trying to pay off those student loans. So that's all we have for you today with Leap Personal Finance. If you have not yet, please download the Leap app. Leap Basic is a free program that's designed for expectant new parents to make sure you have access to all the financial resources and knowledge and insight and everything else to help you navigate this stage of parenthood and this stage of life. And yeah, reach out to us at leappersonalfinance.org, sign up for our newsletter, and we are here to help make sure you can succeed with your little one. All right, that's all we have for you today. I hope all is well. God bless, and we will see you next time.